There we go. Let's do it like this. And then, okay, it's showing 13, but that's not how many I've registered. Oh, I have to unplug, I have to turn everything off or mute it. There we go, there we go, there we go. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome, welcome to Chalet's webinar, virtual learning. This has really turned out to be very, very fun to do. And did everyone get the outline? These are the notes that you're going to be seeing on the PowerPoint and the points I'm going to be talking about. So you can just circle the ones that you find applicable to your own situation. So there is a logo on the copy that you got. It will have a Chalet logo on it. So it was sent by our wonderful behind the scenes team. Actually, her name is Carly. She's wonderful. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm seeing people sign in, and what I need to do is get the PowerPoint up, and oh, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna share the screen, and I need to check on this one and share the screen. Oh, here we go. This is a learning situation for me. Every day in every way I learn something new. There we go. Very good. So this is wonderful. Don't you love this photo? I love this photo. When I made this PowerPoint a couple of years ago, and I've updated it every year, I just love this image because it really just, on a day when we need water, this really, this could quench your thirst if you just looked at this photo, don't you think? So, well, now, one of the things that people, I'm just amazed about is how people don't understand watering. And so Tony Fulmer, who is our Chief Horticultural Officer now, he's semi-retired, but he and I worked together for many, many years doing the Learning Center. And then we'd sit down at the end of every year talking about what topics we got requested on our survey, and then also the topics that we were just hearing from people that they needed to know more about. And one of the things we realized, especially us as a business, because we warranty our plants, is that when people don't understand the importance of watering or the why, this is why I decided to do this. I wanted to do the why it's necessary for watering and how it all works. And when you understand that, it makes you realize, oh, there's a reason, and this is why I need to do my watering at these points and how to do it. And hopefully after you see this, you will really appreciate watering, understand watering, and be able to do it, a little bit better. I think I'm still showing on the screen for you all. I wanted to show you one of my favorite set of tools before we really get started. I love these. I love the Dram products. And what's neat about the Dram is they have these adjustable heads. These are the only two you really need. One is the shower, and the other is the stream. If you have to wash the driveway up, use the stream. Otherwise, you're showering everything else because it's a gentle stream. You don't want to wash soil away from things. But what I love even more is, look at this gizmo right here. This is a thumb drive. So you use your thumb all the way on, all the way off, halfway, off fast, on fast. And it's one-handed. Isn't that cool? And it comes in your favorite colors. So, and then they also have, I'll have to sit back for this one. They have a long-handled one too. Now this has 9 different settings on it, but it also has that great thumb drive. So, you've got all the control right at your thumb tip. It's so great. It's absolutely great. So when we get to the rest of the program, I want to show you the other, my other favorite sprinklers, but we'll get back to that. Welcome, welcome. I see people signing on and signing on. We're still at the title page, so don't worry, you haven't missed anything yet. You all have the handout was sent to you. It's a 4-page handout that you can print up yourself. Yours will have a logo in this, a Chalet logo in the upper corner. This was my prototype, but watch for that. You can print it up later or print it up now, and then just check the parts of the program that are more applicable to you. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Now, the importance of water. it's really the survival of the plants. It's just absolutely incredible. The way the water works is, plants are always trying to maintain an equal necessary equilibrium between the roots all the way to the tips, and including the flowers, and the fruit. And the way that's done is just almost, I think it's almost a miracle. I love it. The parts that are included are the soil, the water's in the soil. Then the roots actually pull the water up, or they're open conduits. Xylem is the water conducting portion of the vascular system, and then stomates are the openings in the leaves. Mostly they're on the underneath sides of the leaves. They can also have a few on the upper sides of the leaves. And those are pores. And what's interesting, when the plant is hydrated, the openings of the stomates are engulfed and full, and so they're closed. When the plant doesn't have enough water, those cells are empty and they open. And then the atmosphere, and it depends on how much atmospheric humidity there is. And when we have drier air and winds, that pulls all the moisture out up through the plant. And it's based more on physics than anything the plant does. Now, it's the capillary action of one water molecule pulling the others out. And as they get pulled away from the transpiration stomates, then more gets pulled up through the plant. Now, if there isn't any water in the soil, guess what happens? Then the plant wilts. So one point that when I was doing the research for this initially was amazing to me is that even when a part of a plant is dead, and so that dead stem is still there, it still allows water to move through it. So that's why it's really important to prune off any dead parts of plants, because it can be a loss of water, especially when we're having hot, dry periods. So that water is regulated by the opening and closing of the stomates. Now, carbon dioxide also moves in through the stomates. So when the stomates are open, then carbon dioxide moves in, helping to facilitate photosynthesis. So photosynthesis happens during the day in sunlight, and so you always want those stomates open to get the best photosynthesis. Now, again, based on water in the plant, photosynthesis can greatly slow or cease completely. If you're not moving the water through the plant. Okay, now this is really interesting. The symptoms of damaged plants. Now you look at underwatering, and for most of us, it makes sense, okay? If the plant is underwatered, you'll see wilting of the leaves, especially in deciduous plants. You'll see when underwatering gets worse and worse, or if there's a steady pattern of underwatering, you'll start seeing browning of the leaf margins. And that term, a horticultural term, is scorching. It gets scorched. And then you'll also see drooping of the green leaves. And one of the horticulture terms that we use when we don't want, when we're like, especially when you hear us on the radio, we won't say over the radio, so-and-so, will you get up to the patio and water those plants that are drooping? Well, we just say flagging. Don't you love hearing those insiders terms? Flagging, flag. Okay, now the next thing that happens when they're underwatered is you get root loss. If you let a plant get too dry, the roots dry back, and especially the little fine, root hairs that are the best at uptaking water, they die. So then a plant has to start over and produce new before it can catch up. Then eventually the entire leaf turns brown, and then it's the ultimate death of the plant. Now, this is pretty interesting. When you look at the symptoms of overwater plants, okay, yellowing of lower foliage. Now that's pretty significant, and that's different than underwatering. But if they're overwatered, the roots start dying, they drown, and then you get wilting of the leaves because the roots can't do their job. They can't conduct the water like they would normally. Then If that happens over and over and over, you get also that the browning of leaf margins. Hey, wait a minute, that was under the underwatering thing, browning of leaf margins. Okay, that's where people get really confused as to what is the problem of, when plants aren't doing well in their garden. Again, root loss due to rot organisms. Rot organisms are mostly water molds. They're not true fungus or fungi. And the water molds are things like Pythium and Rhizoctonia. And we've seen a lot of that this year because of that wet weekend we had in May, where we had 8 inches of rain over a 3-day period. A lot of plants got impacted by that pretty seriously. Now, the other thing with overwatering is chlorosis. Whenever you have waterlogged soil, and when the leaves are forming, when the soil is waterlogged, the roots can't do their job and bring the necessary nutrients up. So the proper pigmentation does not get developed in the leaf. So you don't get as many chlorophyll cells developed. So the leaves aren't truly green. So you have green veins, and then the interveinal tissue, that's the tissue in between the veins. The interveinal tissue is yellow. And that's those are the classic symptoms of chlorosis. Again, the last thing, if it's a pattern over and over and over of overwatering, you get the ultimate death of the plant. So see, there were so many similar things between both that you really have to analyze. When was it water? How much rain we've had to completely understand what's going on. And that's one of the things I always have to ask at least 20 questions when people bring samples in to the Plant Information Center. And to find out and to analyze what's really happening, I have to ask all kinds of questions. So I love it when you bring good samples in. Okay, so now here are the basic rules for watering. You want to do deep, infrequent waterings to saturate the soil to a minimum of 6 inches. And I know when you're testing how your soil is and your patterns, sometimes you have to get a garden trowel, stick it in 6 to 8 inches, and then you stick it straight in and shove it up, shove it forward, so you can reach down and feel if how moist the soil is all the way down to 6 inches. And sometimes it's frightening when you realize how dry our soil can get, and that we don't even realize it. And when we get these thunderbursts, and you think, it seems like a downpour, it seems like so much rain. This is why it's really important to have a rain gauge at your house. So after it rains, you can check to see exactly how much water was delivered by the rainfall. And I have to admit that I am so disappointed more often than not, especially when it's been so hot, these last 4 weeks. So, so always watch the rain gauge at your house so you know exactly how much rain has been dropped on your property, on your soil. Okay, now newly planted plants should be treated like intensive care patients, which means checking the root balls. That means taking your finger and actually feeling the root ball about 4 to 6 inches away from the stem or the trunk to see if it's moist. If it's not moist, that means you really have to water, and do that daily for the first 3 weeks, because it takes 6 to 8 weeks for the roots to grow from a root ball out into the surrounding soil. So, again, for the first 3 weeks, then 3 times weekly for 6 weeks total. And sometimes you'll see 6 to 8 weeks, for that. And then be conscious of watering needs for newly planted plants for the first 1 to 3 years until they're established. Okay, so these patterns, following these rules really encourages a deep, healthy root system, and you want it to go as deep as it can. And unfortunately, in our primarily clay soils, our roots don't go deep at all because they can't get enough oxygen. So they tend to stay in the upper 6 to 8 inches of the soil. So, but if you keep that well watered, that's sufficient, and they do just fine. There are going to be some exceptions to these basic rules. I'll highlight those when we're talking about them. Now, this is my house, and this is my front yard, and I love the story about this big tree. This is a huge honey locust tree, It's probably been there 75 years, and it is absolutely gorgeous, and it's probably 100 feet tall, and it has a beautiful light shade. And when I asked my arborist to mulch it one time, he mulched it out to the drip line. So my son called me. He had just gotten home from school that day, called me, and it was his job at the time to mow the lawn, and he was thrilled that the lawn had been reduced with so much size. But I want to point out in this, see the sprinkler head that's popped up from the center or the edge of that flower bed? That is a sprinkler system that was installed. The house was built in 49, and the sprinkler system was put in 1961. And it's a golf course sprinkler system with copper lines. And the man that owned the house, that built the house, was head of International Harvester. And that was the company that put in all the sprinkler systems at the International Harvester landscape out southwest of the city. And so I swear my first husband bought the house because of that sprinkler system. He convinced me we should buy that house. I got the house in the divorce. so excuse me. So I'm still dealing with that sprinkler system, and it's incredible. It's incredible. Okay. So now here's the guideline. You know, this is the basic guideline. Plants need 1 inch of rain, or the equivalent in supplemental water or sprinkling, per week when the temperature is 75 degrees or cooler. Now, for every 10 degrees above 75, you need to add an additional ½ inch of water. So when it's 85, we should be getting 1.5 inches of rain. When it was 95, like we had the last 2 weeks, 90 to 95, we should have been getting 2 inches of rain a week. And when we had those little thunder shower things that seemed so promising, I raced home from work that day and realized we'd only had 3/8 of an inch of rain. Oh, so disappointing, so disappointing. So that's when you really have to make sure you get your sprinklers set up and do it on the days when it's not raining. Now, to prevent the transpiration stress, and what that is when plants are transpiring during the higher temperatures and the higher winds, if you just give them one soaking once a week and then wait for a week to water them again, the plant will go through transpiration stress. And my analogy to that is, if you drank a gallon of water on last Sunday, but you didn't have anything to drink until yesterday, which was Monday, would you be thirsty? Heavens, yes. So when it's that hot and windy, and you really want to water, and divide the 2 inches or the 1.5 inches. Let's just say it's 85. So 1.5 inches of rain, and we're not getting it. Divide it into 3 applications of a ½ inch each, and you turn your sprinkler on, set a rain gauge out in the middle of the pattern, or just even put tuna cans. You know what I love? Those Stouffer's lasagnas, those little miniature Stouffer's lasagnas, good for one person. Those trays are really neat to put out on the lawn, and or at the base of a plant. If you're worried about the watering, put it right at the root zone of the plant. Run your sprinkler, and then go check to see how much water actually made it to that container sitting on the ground where the roots are. Many people are horrified when they realize that they're not getting as much water as they thought. So I'll follow those guidelines. Now, the factors affecting the water needs, and I'm going to go over each of these. This is kind of an outline what we're going to be going over. The plant type, the season, light conditions, humidity levels, soil type, whether the plant is mulched or not, and whether the plant is established, or whether it's a first year transplant, or if it's a container grown or balled and burlap. So I'm going to go over all these one by one. This is one of the stars of the show for the summer. This is one of the hydrangeas, and this is a macrophylla type, the large leaf type. This is one of the endless summers, actually doing what it's supposed to do, flower. And but you can see the big leaf surfaces, and that's something that's critical to observe and understand. So these are the characteristics of the different plants that affect how they need water and how frequently you should water them. So if they have large soft leaves like hydrangeas, there's much more surface area and then a higher transpiration rate. So they can lose water more quickly than say plants that are like evergreens. So if you're aware of that, number one, you can plant them in the proper place. You know, hydrangeas are just horrible planted in a spot where they're going to get late afternoon sun and full hot sun. Man, they'll wilt out every time, every day. So then the next group of plants are needled evergreens. They have waxier coverings on those needles, much heavier cuticle. They rarely show signs of drought stress until it's been too long and until the needles turn brown. So be really aware of your evergreens. Now broadleaf evergreens, those are things like rhododendrons and azaleas. They have a waxy cuticle, but they have a larger surface area. So anytime there's a larger area, there's more chance of water evaporating out of that leaf surface. Now deciduous versus evergreen, deciduous plants, that is particularly set up for winter survival. So when they drop all those leaves in the winter, then they don't have to worry about what's happening to the water in the plant. It really just seals the plant up at the top, and then all the roots are stored in the bottom. Whereas evergreens, they can get winter damage, and they can get desiccated in the wintertime when the temperatures are very low and we have high winds. When the roots are frozen, when the ground is frozen, so the roots are frozen, and when I say frozen, it's frozen because it's below 32. But what's amazing about our root systems and for our dormant plants, they never experience temperatures below 27 degrees. That's 27 degrees above zero. Whereas we get our average low temperature, and that's ambient air temperature in the winter, can be 20 below. So the large mass of the ground really saves our roots of our plants. But we're talking now water again. But when the ground is frozen, the roots can't take any water up. So if those evergreen leaves are exposed to high winds when it's freezing temperatures, the freezing condition can also wick moisture out of a leaf as well. And then now the next group of leaves are the gray or fuzzy leaves. Now they're that way for a reason. They're usually full sun plants. The gray surfaces reflect the light off, so they don't get as hot. And then the fuzzy coverings. The good example of this one is the lower photo. That's a lamb's ear or stachys, and that fuzz on the leaf helps keep the water that's transpiring out of the stomates closer to the leaf surface and keeps it from evaporating away as quickly. So these are all modifications, and if you understand the plants you're working with, you understand why you would need to water them less or water them more. And so that's why I like to point that out, so you understand what your plants are dealing with. Okay, now the season's another really important variable. Winter and early spring, the soils are frozen, so the plants can get desiccated then as well, because the roots can't bring anything up. Again, the temperatures are below freezing, and then we have those high winds. It can really wick moisture away from all the plant parts that are exposed, and above ground. Summer and fall, you have the benefit of rainfall. You have the benefit of lower temperatures or higher temperatures. So you just have to be aware of those. And then high winds. High winds are one of the worst things that can affect plants, because you can wick the water out of the plant much more quickly than you would even realize. This plant at the bottom is just a lovely, I love this. This bottle brush buckeye. Gorgeous. That's one shrub, and it's just beautiful, and it's in bloom right now. I have one of these in my backyard. I love it, love it, love it. Boy, you talk about pollinator friendly. I watched 8 monarch butterflies working it. I had 2 days off, Sunday and Monday, and I just watched it. It was like a whole flock of monarch butterflies that flew in and just worked that plant, over and over and over, pollen and nectar, and it was great. But because of the large leaf surface, it can also, lose a lot of water pretty quickly. So be aware of these things, these variables. Now, light conditions, there's sun and there's shade. How plants react in full sun is very, very temperature dependent. Higher temperatures, full sun, the plants are transpiring much more quickly. They would need water more, or they're going to use more water. More water is going to go through their system. Okay, so that's the time of day. Morning sun is much easier on plants. You get the light intensity, but you don't get the temperature impact as well. So morning sun is a lot easier on plants, than the afternoon sun. Afternoon sun, you're dealing with higher temperatures, and then the intense sun as well. So that impacts, the water processing and the water use of, the plant goes through. Now, follow that basic rule when you have a sun situation, and that's at 75 degrees or cooler, 1 inch of rain, a half inch for every 10 degrees above. Now, it's much better to water early in the morning or late in the afternoon. And if you're watering late in the afternoon, allow 3 to 4 hours for the foliage to dry off before nightfall. Otherwise, you predispose the plant to fungal diseases on the leaves, particularly powdery mildew. But I actually like to encourage people to really focus on watering in the morning. And I know mornings are tough because you got to get to work and all that stuff. But I do the analogy of, someone running a marathon. You hydrate before and hydrate during. You don't wait till the end of the race to replenish your water levels. So if you can think in terms of like a marathon runner. Now, shade, when you've got plants in shade, it's much cooler on that same day than it would be in the sun. So there's less transpiration, so less water is needed. And particularly in shade, you want to avoid watering late in the day because the leaves don't dry off as quickly in the shade. And so you can really predispose a plant to all kinds of fungal diseases and also slugs, slugs like that moist condition. So, okay. So now soil type. Soil type is so amazing, and we really understand that here. Our soils have such a high component of clay. The problem with clay is the fact that it's the small particle sizes of the soil. If you're going to analyze all the particle sizes of soil, and this is your agronomy 101 lesson here, sand and sand particles are the largest particles. So if you can picture a medicine ball, sitting on my desk here, a medicine ball would be the sand particle, and then going down through the other parts and sizes of the soil particles, you go all the way to the smallest particle is the clay particle, and it would be like a pea, like a sweet pea, and compared to a medicine ball. The other complicating factor of clay is that they're flat. So they stick together. The particles stick together, and then especially when it's wet, you get the moisture that holds those particles together, squeezing out all the oxygen. And so you always want to amend clay with larger particles to help open it up, to get the aeration down in there, to get the oxygen down into the part. Okay, so you can understand your drainage in your own yard by doing a test. You dig a hole that's 8 inches deep and then fill it with water and see how long it takes to drain. If it drains within 20 minutes, oh, you have excellent drainage. If it's an hour, it's still okay. It's not a problem. But if it takes all afternoon or all day to drain, that's a true indicator that you have heavy clay. Another test is when you're digging in your soil and you grab a handful of it and squeeze it. When you lift your fingers open, if you can still see the indentations where your fingers were, then that's another very high indicator that you have a high percentage of clay, probably 70% clay. Now, add any organic soil amendments, not peat moss though. Peat moss holds 10 times its weight in water, and that just compounds the problem with clay. So you want to do any kind of like leaf mulch, any bark mulch, like shredded bark mulch. My favorite is a product that we've been selling for years. It's called cotton burr mulch or cotton burr compost. And the cotton plant is an interesting plant. They have the woody stems, and then they have this thing called a burr. And that's where the cotton ball is. When you harvest the cotton ball, it's out. You have that woody burr that stays there and the woody stem, and then all the leaves. They harvest the whole plant, chop it all up, and then compost it. And it's like a wonderful cross between leaf mulch and shredded hardwood mulch. So I love that. The other benefit is because of the pH of the cotton, it will lower the pH, the high pH of we have very, very alkaline soils. So it's a great thing. Now, I do want to add that when you're mulching anything that's a clay, don't mulch more than 2 inches deep, because if we do get a rainy period, then the mulch more than 2 inches will keep the soil from drying out appropriately and keep it from getting aerated. So only 2 inches on top of clay that's all that's necessary. Now, one benefit, I have to talk nice about clay. It holds more minerals and nutrients. And if you can add to the drainage and improve the drainage, oh my gosh, you get just phenomenally nutrient and productive soils. Now, sand is the other one we're dealing with here, because we're so close to the lake. We have those sand ridges, in between here and in between the clay ridges. And sand drains more quickly because of the particle size. We've got that great big medicine ball size. The water drains right through it. The way to help sandy soil is to add organic amendments. And what that does is that enhances the moisture retention. You can actually use peat moss. You can actually use peat moss for sand, because it holds in 10 times its weight in water. So that it really does benefit. Now, sand also requires more nutrient additions, because one benefit, going back to clay has a very high, it's called a cation exchange capacity, because there's so many surfaces for the cations to attach to. In sand, they can't attach to sand, and there's the surface area is there, but the nutrients don't attach. So nutrients just wash out. When the water drains through, the nutrients drain through too. So you have to add more nutrient additions. Now, it's okay to mulch a sandy soil with 4 inches, of mulch, because that will really help keep the soil temperature more uniform and the soil moisture more uniform. So again, understand your soil types and how your water is being used and stored in the soil. Now, mulch. We horticulturists recommend use organic mulches only, and that keeps the soil moisture and the temperature more consistent. It also holds down weed development. It blocks the sunlight from the weed seeds, so the weeds can't germinate. So the organic ones are things like shredded bark mulch, chunk bark mulch, or chunk bark, leaf mold. We also call that just leaf mulch, chalet leaf mulch, but the traditionalists call that leaf mold. I kind of hate that term, but anyway, it's leaf mulch. And then pine needles are excellent. If you have a lot of pine needles, ooh, it's a great mulch. The nice benefit of that is it really repels slugs. Slugs hate crawling over and through pine needles. Now, the newest research, this is now it's probably about 10 years. Dr. Ed Gilman is from the University of Florida, and he's done some phenomenal research. And one thing that I love telling people is that no bark-based mulch should be directly over a root ball for the first year a plant is planted. So you have a tree or a shrub, don't put that bark mulch over there, because what happens, if you just get a little bit of water, the mulch absorbs it and never releases it into the root ball. So I know Tony Fulmer and I both really like either the chalet leaf mulch or the cotton burr compost, because it holds moisture, but it also lets the moisture go through, down into the soil. It doesn't soak it all up. A lot of those bark mulches will just soak it all up, especially if a little bit, 3/8 of an inch rain, nothing ever gets down to the roots. And so it's really, really sad. Now, avoid stone mulches on top of plant root zones. Stones heat up during the day and hold the heat throughout the night. And so then the plant doesn't get to experience the 10-degree drop between nocturnal temperatures and diurnal temperatures. And they really depend on that. So if you have those stones on top of the root zone, it holds the heat and it ends up braising the roots. I mean, almost cooking the roots. So this is a perfect photo of the example of that. You can see that lava rock at the base of those two arborvitae. And this was just down the street. I think this is about 10 years ago when I did this photo. Just down the street on Skokie Boulevard, there's a gas station on the, that would be the east side of the street. And these were right off the parking lot. And you can see this poor little arborvitae that's right next to the asphalt and the concrete curb, and with all that lava rock surrounding it, it just didn't have a chance. It just didn't have a chance. And it was one of those really hot, dry summers. And the one behind it, it survived and did better because you can see the lawn on the backside of it. So, so the front part, what happened was, I'm sure that plant, instead of just having the roots underneath the stone, it just had its roots go all the way back the other direction underneath that lawn. And that's why it survived. But don't you love how, the plants tell you what's going on? All I do is take a photo. Okay, so now turf damage. Turf damage is also, this was a sodded area. The village had done some work on the curbs and then resodded this. And what happened, you can see where the edge of the sod lifted up. And, and to have prevented that, if someone had just walked along that edge, I mean, I'm not kidding, stepping on it, just walked on the edge, that would have made that sod stay in contact with the soil better. So the roots could have, it's called knitted in. The roots will knit in as they're growing in. But as the way it is now, all this sod has to be replaced because it just dried out. And that was that hot summer. I think that was 2012. Really hot summer. Okay, here we go. Let's keep moving. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now when you're talking about turf, there's established turf versus new turf, and then there's seed and sod. So for an established, all an established lawn needs to stay alive is a ½ inch of water a month. And, right now we're not having any watering restrictions, but you all have lived through the watering restrictions. And we said, well, you can't water, or you can only water on odd number days or something like that. But, if you really get restricted, we're not getting rain, as long as you get a half inch of water a month, the crowns will stay alive. The grass plants will go dormant. And that means that it will brown out, not unlike, I think I can go backwards. Can I go backwards? I can't. No, I can't. Drat. Now I really blew it. Hooey. Hold on. I did it. See, okay, right there. That could just be dormant turf. No, that's dead. That's dead. I know that's dead. Sorry about that. Okay, so now daily inspection for the if it's newly planted, grass seeds and or sod, you have to inspect it daily for 3 to 4 weeks to make sure that it has enough moisture to keep it actively rooting in and getting established. Now seed, the make or break when you're seeding a lawn is you have to keep the seed moist from the minute it touches the soil through germination and through establishment. If it ever dries out once in that 28-day period, then those baby grass plants die and you have to start over. And so there's so many people that come in and say, I've never had good luck with seed. And usually it's because you have to be really dedicated to watering. Either that, or you have to use their wonderful products now. There's a product from Soil Moist that has graphite and the acrylic polymer, and you coat your seeds with it. The graphite attracts the sun and makes it warmer, and then the acrylic polymer keeps it moist around it, and you really get successful seeding on that. But that's, I'm off to a side, sorry about that. Now, what you want to do is, on all the grass seed on turf plants, there's usually 3 or 4 different varieties that are in we call it a mix. And so there's bluegrasses, there's perennial ryegrass, and there are the fescues, 2 different types of fescues. The fescues and rye germinate in 7 to 10 days. When it's cool outside, it usually takes 10 days. When it's warmer, and when the soil is warmer, it only takes 7 days. So it'll green up. It'll green up in 7 days. But the bluegrasses, which are the desirable, the most desirable, lawn plant, they will take 14 to 21 days. When the soils are this warm, they'll germinate in 14 days, as long as you keep it nice and consistently moist. But like in the springtime, it will take 21 days and then up to 28 days for the plants, the roots to get established until you can go back to the regular watering pattern of, once or twice a week to keep the turf happy. Now, if it's sod, you want to keep it lightly syringed. That means just sprinkling it lightly 2 times a day for those 3 to 4 weeks. And that's what it takes. You want to keep it as moist as just a wrung out sponge. And then that enables the roots to grow down into the soil. We call that knitting in. As soon as those roots knit into the soil underneath it, then the plant will be, the sod will be really happy. One of the things that you should consider doing with sod, a sodded lawn, is core aerating it every fall, after it's been in for the summer, because what that does is that opens up the plugs of the soil, brings the soil up to the top, and you break those plugs apart, and it introduces the sod to the soil that it's going to be growing into. And so the roots aren't tempted to stay up in the mother soil at the top. And so you want to break that barrier. It's called a barrier, and the core aeration does that. And so when the moisture and the nutrient can get deeper down into the soil, the roots know the soil then too, and they'll grow more deeply, and you'll have a really, really good, well-established lawn. Okay, so now on the notes it says you can test the sod by gently trying to pull it up, but don't do that too often, because if you're always tugging on it, you're going to rip the roots out. But I don't suggest that people even start to test it after 14 days of having the sod in place. And don't be afraid to walk on the sod. Walk on it, and what that does, that makes the mother soil and the roots come in contact with your soil that you want the sod to grow into. So don't be afraid to walk on it. Okay, just don't run on it. Don't let the dogs rustle around on it. Okay. All right. Now for herbaceous plants. Okay. So like annuals, perennials. Okay. If they're containers, they, especially with the temperatures we have now, they will need to be watered probably twice daily, at least once a day. If they're in full sun, then definitely once in the morning, and then once when you get home from work or late in the afternoon. Annuals in planting beds, just follow the basic rule. At 75 degrees or cooler, 1 inch of rain per week. Now, if you're using automatic sprinkler systems, where you're only getting one type of delivery, make sure you have plants that like the same kind of delivery, the same kind of water application. If you've got the sprinkler set higher, longer timing, it's going to be wetter. So make sure the plants that are like those conditions get grouped together. That they'll get grouped together that way, so they get the same kind of watering. Okay, now perennials. Learn each plant's specific requirements, water requirements, and again, group them together. And then you want to treat all those plants, if they're newly planted, like that intensive care patient for the first 6 to 8 weeks, while the roots are going from the root ball out into the surrounding soil. And always use your finger to actually feel the root ball. It is not unusual if you've got a watering system, or you're using your sprinklers a lot, to have the surrounding soil be moist. But if we're hot and windy, you can actually feel that root ball, and it feels dry to the touch about 2 inches away from the stem. So always check the root balls. That's the most important thing. Okay, and after those 6 to 8 weeks, then follow that basic rule: 1 inch at 75 degrees or less, and an additional ½ inch every 10 degrees. Okay, all right, now this is an example of evergreen damage. And this was a poor house. This was on Old Glenview Road. And I was driving by with my camera, be careful. And this was back in the old days when you didn't go anywhere without a camera. Now we just use our phones. But this property hadn't been maintained at all. And you can just see how the evergreens really suffered from it. The arborvitae, again, notice that's just mulch. That's mulch. And that's a graded or a ground wood chip. And I was warning about how it absorbed all the water. The little rain we were getting, it was all being absorbed by that mulch, and none went down into the root zone. So those poor arborvitae are really showing it. The little globe arborvitae, same problem. And then you can see the yews, the Japanese yews, when they start turning yellow like that and browning out, that was the new growth that was doing the browning. So you can really see it was suffering. Now this is deciduous tree damage. And this was a poor street tree out on, I think this was Sunset Ridge Road. And they were planted out on the right of way of the street. The owner's property was where that fence ended. So the owner had no idea that they were supposed to take care of the trees. The village dropped the ball on doing that. You can see, and it was also mulched with wood chips. So any water that it did get, any rain it did get, the chips just held it. And then these poor plants, you can see how when the new leaves came out on that upper, I guess when you're looking at that, if you're looking at the screen, it's going to be your upper left-hand corner. You can see the large leaves that came out at the beginning, and it was probably, they developed probably before the plant was planted. And then as you go up the tip, you can see how the leaves are just getting smaller and smaller and more stunted and more stunted and more stunted. And that's just because that poor plant wasn't getting water when it needed it. And then the bottom right shows how stunted all those leaves were on that new branch. And then you also get the added problem of the chlorosis. When the roots aren't pulling enough nutrients up because either don't have water to carry them up, or if they have waterlogged soil, you still get, this is chlorosis. So you can see how the veins are dark green, but the interveinal tissue is yellow. And then you can tell that and you can see all the edges were browning out. So this poor plant didn't make it. I went back and checked later and it died. It's so sad to watch that. Okay, so now woody plants, you want to follow, when they're established, follow that basic rule of 1 inch of rain per week, increasing with temperature. Now, if they're newly planted, and I kind of went over this earlier, but I want to repeat it. If they were potted or container plants, hand water directly into the root ball 2 to 3 times per week until they're established. Now, establishment means that if it's a shrub, they're usually established 1 year, 1 to 2 years. 3 if it's a tree. It takes 3 years. It takes 3 years for the roots to grow back to what they were originally when the plant was in the field before it was dug and replanted. If a plant was balled and burlapped, there usually are heavier soils, but unfortunately 60 to 80% of the roots were left out in the field. And you've got the root collar, which is really instrumental in helping, in helping plants, recover. And that's why we can transplant plants like we do, because of the root collar. And that research done out at the Morton Arboretum by Dr. Gary Watson has shown that 60% of an entire root system uptake is done at the root collar. So that's why we can dig and ball and burlap things and help the plants recover from that. Okay, so now this is Tony's hot tip. I love sharing his wisdom. Okay, so this was back, he developed this when he was the nursery manager here at Shelley. And that's when I started working with him. Oh my gosh, I've been here 29 years. And that's when he hired me 29 years ago. I was a sweet young thing. But now, before you plant a new plant, set it in the location where it will be planted in the garden, just like above ground, and practice watering it while it is still above ground. So that means using a watering can or using a hose, and measure how much you're pouring over it and see how much it takes to thoroughly moisten that soil ball, whether it's in a container or balled and burlap, and then keep track of it. And then that's how much you need to use when you're watering it when it's in the ground. Isn't that great? You kind of practice before you get it planted. It's sort of like practicing driving. You practice, and you get the patterns, and then and then keep doing that, watering it that amount until it gets established. Tony has great ideas. Now, I want to show you this. This was Dr. Gilman's research, and it's really interesting to see there's variation. And he did research, and this was for professionals, professional groundskeepers and park managers and like golf course, people. And so he and his team did the research on the difference between watering for vigor, and vigor is when you're in a production phase. Like like up at our farm, we water for vigor because we want the plants to grow. We want to take from little baby plants to big plants that we can take and use in landscapes. So there's a difference between vigor and there's a difference between survival. And survival would be somebody like a park manager that wants to put a tree in and just have it survive and be happy where it's living and not grow, to resell it. And so to get the difference, vigor and survival. So the size of the nursery stock, if it's less than 2-inch caliper, and you measure at shoulder height to get the caliper or the diameter of a trunk. So if it's less than 2 inches, you want to water daily for 2 weeks, and then every other day for 2 months, and then weekly until it's established. And that can take, when they say for how many inches of trunk diameter is how many years it would take for the roots to get back. So a 2-inch is going to take 2 years. Now, if you're just doing survival, twice weekly for 2 to 3 months. And then after that, following the 1 inch at 75 degrees with rainfall. Now, 2 to 4 inch caliper, daily for a month. So you can see it's doubled. And then, instead of 2 weeks, but that's a big, big tree. And then every other day for 3 months, a week until established. Now, if again, it's survival, twice weekly for 3 or 4 months. And that keeps the roots happy and growing in the surrounding soil. Now, large trees, we rarely sell trees at 4-inch caliper. Our landscape division does and plants them. It takes a huge, big truck to get them moved in. But daily for 6 weeks, daily, isn't that, a lot of people they just can't believe that. But daily for 6 weeks, and then every other day for 5 months until it's established. And that can be up to 4 years. And then if it's survival, twice weekly for 3 to 4 months. So I love sharing this because it's such an eye opener for what plants really need. Okay, so now your tools. These are the tools you're going to be using. And you have irrigation systems, and those are sprinklers, and they're either oscillating or pulsating. Oscillating is when they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And oscillators can lose up to 20% of the water to evaporation. Pulsating is where it pulses in circles, and it throws the water out, and it only loses 4 to 6% to evaporation. So if you're conserving water, use those pulsating ones. Now the hoses, they're the soakers and the weepers. The soaker hoses that when we were kids, we would run through, it was a flat hose and it had holes in the top, and then the sprays went up in the air and you could run through when you're in your little bikinis, and it was really fun. I like to use those when I'm watering plants out in my garden. I turn them upside down so the water goes directly in the soil. And then weepers are the ones that ooze, they ooze and sweat out and then usually those are right on top of the soil and covered with mulch. Now, in ground sprinkler systems, please don't rely on the sprinkler system people to set the times to run each zone, because they're plumbers after all. And no offense to plumbers, but you want to measure, you want to calibrate your irrigation system. That's what's right below, because you want to see exactly how much that watering head is delivering for the amount of time it was set to run. And so when you calibrate your own irrigation system, it's just easy. What that means, it sounds really official, but that just means you can tell turf guys set this one up. But you set containers out in the pattern of the spray, and then run the sprinkler for however long you're running it, and then check to see how much water is in each of those containers. Now, I don't do that many. You can tell turf guys did this. I do one right about a 1.5 feet from the sprinkler head, all the way at the end of the pattern and right in the middle of the pattern. So I do 3 and then average. And then the goal is to get a 1/2 inch in the middle one. If you can actually do it a ½ inch out of the far one, and then you'll have much more closer to the head. But that's how you know, and you know then, you know exactly how much water is being delivered. I can't tell you because I don't know what your water pressure is at your house. Guess what? At my house, it's different. In the morning, when everyone on the block is taking showers along the street, the water pressure is less than in the afternoon when I get home from work. So, measure at the time you're going to be running your sprinkler system or turning your sprinkler on, and then you know exactly how much water is being delivered. So it's really important. It's really important. Okay, these are the oozers, and these are black plastic, and then the water just oozes out. You can just see it you can see droplets along the edges. When you're using these, what I like to encourage you to do is set the timer and set it for a certain amount of time, and then check down in the soil, dig down in the soil to see how moist it's going, because you want it to go at least 6 inches down into the soil for however long you run that. This is an oscillating one that I was talking about. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You can cover a lot of the area, so you're not moving the sprinkler around a lot, but you're also losing a lot to evaporation when it shoots it way up in the air and lets it drop back down. I like the pulsating ones. Here's my house. No, this is before I put my other bed in. But you can see these are pulsating systems, and they just cycle all around, and they throw the water, and it doesn't go up in the air and just and drop back down. It gets thrown out into the lawn. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is it. Oh, what am I doing? Huh. Here, I'll do this. There we go. Oh, this was a later picture of my house in my front garden. And then you can see all the sprinkler heads. Oh gosh, that was back when we had the next door neighbor. They had 5 kids, and that was their baseball diamond in the front yard. There was always a ball laying around somewhere. They've moved away, thank goodness. And we have a really nice person that lives there now that likes to garden. So that I'm biased. Anyway, but you can see how the sprinklers were really, and that was that hot, dry summer. So you can see my lawn was really suffering. It was drying out. And I wasn't watering enough. But anyway, those are how you want, that's how you want to, let's do this. Okay, now hand watering. Hand watering, use watering cans, use watering wands like I showed you, or like my favorite thumb drive. And then there's bubblers. Bubblers are okay. I also call those tricklers, where you just leave a hose just trickling a little bit on top of a root ball. And I hate that. It never waters the plant enough, and it just gets one side of the root ball wet. So you have to move that around. You usually have to leave it for so long that you forget about it. I'd much rather just encourage people to mentally divide the root ball into 4 different quadrants. Take your watering wand and then hold it over one quadrant, count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Move it to the second quadrant. Count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Third quadrant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fourth quadrant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do that 3 times, and you have sufficiently watered your root ball. It is really a neat trick, and all it takes is, if you count, 2 minutes times 3, 6 minutes to adequately water a plant. Now the root feeders. I don't particularly like root feeders at all. And it's a lot of excess work, a lot of excess labor having to punch that pole in the ground underneath the whole, root area of a plant or a tree. And, it's just so much easier to set up a sprinkler and let it run, just let it run. Most people, when they're using root feeders, they stick the feeder in way too deeply, and you're just getting the sublayer of the soil wet. They stick it in as far as they think they have to, and can be 18 inches. And really, you only want to put the water in the top 6 to 8 inches of the soil. So if you can do that, great. Some people like that as therapy. I think it's a waste of time, but I'd rather more adequately water. And I talked about the watering wands. These are some of my old favorites, but now we've got that new thumb drive. Okay. Oh, I was going to show you. Let me go back. Okay, let's go back. These are called rose heads, and there's a whole bunch of little holes, and they call it a rose head because it breaks up the flow of water, so you get a gentle shower, not a torrential downpour. And when you have a torrential downpour of water, it can wash soil away from the roots. So always use a watering wand where you have that shower attachment. Okay, now containers must be watered daily. Again, we talked about that, or more when temperatures and winds are high. Use the acrylic polymers in containers. They really help. We sell the product called Soil Moist, and an acrylic polymer, they look like little pieces of rock salt, and you mix them in the soil when you're planting the container, or if you've already got it planted, take a pencil and stick holes in 4 to 6 holes in the container, and then sprinkle those polymers in it. When you water them, they puff up, and then they hold water, and then when the soil dries out, the roots will grow into and find those molecules and pull the water out of them. And then once they're dry, each time you rewater, they puff back up. So it's a real nice insurance for any of your containers. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of hand watering is, you can either, or any supplemental watering, you have wet foliage, you have evaporation, so you lose water. But one of the advantages is you can really selectively water a certain area. So if you've planted plants in a border that need more water, in like a shade situation, you can hand water to give them more water than your sprinkler system would have given it. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of doing hand watering. Okay, we're coming to the very end of this. I want you to avoid a landscape of drought and neglect. This was the landscape that I had shown you details of, the damaged evergreens. That was a sad look. And so with that, I'm going to end you with looking out my front window at my sprinklers running. It's so nice whenever I see that. And then this is the last one. May your red buds never look like this. And you can tell that poor redwood didn't get enough water. It died, and it's trying to grow shoots from the roots. So may your red buds never look like this. What I'm going to do, we're right at 11. I'm going to pull up this to see. Wait, there was one question. Oh, there's several questions here. Let me answer those. Okay. Okay. The first one is intermittent watering better than all at once. Oh, you know what? When you asked that was kind of early on, and I like the intermittent because it breaks it up especially if we have excessively hot periods. It breaks the stress from the plant. And I think I addressed that after you asked that question. Okay, then Deborah, that was Tanya Haskett. This is Deborah. What are some alternatives to turf grass lawns that are more environmentally friendly, needing less water and or less fertilizer or pesticides? Well, I'm not going to talk about fertilizer or pesticides right now, but I'll address the water issue. There's all kinds of wonderful, and depending on whether you have sun or shade, there's some neat new grasses too. There's buffalo grass that works great, and you just mow it twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, and it's much more user friendly as far as not requiring a lot of water. Most of the ground covers are excellent alternatives to turf, and some will even take some light foot traffic on them. So great question, Deborah. Now Kristen Faust, hi. I have a container garden on my roof deck. Okay, it's a mix of flower and vegetables, full sun and windy. I'm watering almost every morning. Should I water in the AM or late afternoon? I would say, and I did address that during the program, that do it definitely in the morning, And then if you have to water again, late in the afternoon, you can, but definitely, and it's really hard, but I've learned to just get up early to water all my containers, and it kind of, I take my cup of coffee out with me, and it's kind of a neat way to wake up in the morning. So great question. Here's another new one. Did you say 3 rounds or 5 rounds? Oh, 3 rounds or 5 rounds for the watering system of counting to 5 4/4. Oh, that was 3 rounds. 3 rounds. You go each quarter. all the way around, and do that three rounds, and that gives you a great, you can really feel comfortable about having all of your, the root balls nice and watered. You're welcome, Rhonda. Thank you so much. This is so fun. I'm really getting used to this. Let me check the time. I think it's 11 o'clock. So if you have to sign off, I understand. I'll stay around to answer a few more questions. I was looking to see, I've got the Q&A, and then there was also like a chat thing, I thought, but I'm not, let me just see what this is over here. Hold on, she says. Okay, there. Oh no, these are all the questions. I think I got all the questions. I don't know if I should be scrolling down or not. Hold on real quick. Let's try this. Oh, no, I did it. I did it. Okay. Well, I think everybody, thank you so much. This was a wonderful group today. I think we're hitting the target with our topics, and it was really encouraging to see so many people doing this on a Tuesday. Okay, let me see if, oh wait, here we go. Oh, there's the chat. Okay, here's chat. Okay, root ball covering with mulch. Okay, is that on top of putting mulch before planting or after planting on the ground? Okay, the root ball covering with mulch, that's putting the mulch on top of that root ball after you plant. Okay, thank you. This was great. Thank you, Amy. That was a nice compliment. This is great. Thank you, thank you. And help, thanks so much. Oh, you all are doing such a, thank you so much. This is wonderful. And I'm gonna see if I can scroll up or down. I think I got it. I think I got it. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Ooh, I did make it bigger. I just signed up, so I didn't get the email with the supplemental information. Please send it to Cindy. Okay, Cindy, we'll make sure we get your handout. Okay, you didn't see it at Jane Newfield. We'll make sure you get that. Okay, only seeing the water page, only seeing the water screen. Marion Wolf, I'm sure hoping that went through the rest. Okay, can't see the dram, just the opening screen. Ooh, Amy? Okay, cannot see what you're referring to. Oh, I see. It's just my PowerPoint was showing. I'm so sorry. I'll make sure that I show up also later. My well-established turf goes brown along the walks where the brick stones store heat. Should I just water by hand there in addition to sprinkler? Yes. Lawrence, that was a great question. It's Lawrence Parfit. Hand water those areas. Okay, what is the difference in wood chip and wood bark mulch? Ooh, Usha, that was a great question. I hope you're still on. Wood chip is it's smaller particles, and the problem with that is it can knit together, and it soaks up the water so much more quickly than just a wood chunk bark. Okay, Kristen Fallis, this was fabulous. Thank you. And then Natalie, I think we got that earlier. So helpful from Suzanne. Thank you. Root ball covering with mulch. Is that on top? I answered that. Thank you. It was great. Thank you. It was great. Great presentation. Thank you. How do I get the handout? Usha, we'll resend it. Okay. And let me see. Okay. I can't tell you how glad I am to, thank you so much, Chris. And then adding thanks for this program, very helpful tips. Your slides and your image came through just fine. Oh, thank you, Joan. And then Sue, I bought a beautiful lupine that we cannot plant until the fall after we re-landscape our yard. I know they are root-bound plants. Do you think it will survive? Keep watering it, very well. But I would actually repot it into a bigger container. And that's Sue on your lupine. Okay, thanks a lot for the great tips. I think we did it, everybody. Thank you so much. And I guess I should go back to this one. Hold on, let me see if I can do this. Oh, here. That's not doing it. Well, I have to learn more about this how to get back and forth. So everybody, I'm just gonna say thank you and goodbye. We'll see you. I'm doing another one on Friday about doing your maintenance on perennial garden maintenance. That's going to be a fun one too. So So hey, thank you, you all. I love getting so many people involved. Bye now. Okay, I think we got them all. Those are the questions. And bye bye, y'all.